Welcome everyone to the full council meeting, including members, officers and any members of the public who may be attending remotely. Please be advised that the meeting will be live streamed and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the council's website. The following staff are in attendance: the Chief Executive, the Director of Regeneration and Neighbourhoods Online, the Monitoring Officer and Democratic Services Officers. Anybody who's a bit hot and wearing a jacket, you may remove it. Make it nice and easy. So agenda item 1 is the emergency evacuation procedures. There is no scheduled test of the fire alarm, and if the alarm does sound, please leave the building as quickly as possible using the doors signed as fire escapes and assemble in the car park at the front of the building and await instructions. If there is anyone in attendance that may require assistance in evacuating the building, please make yourselves known now. Nope, nice easy trip down then if that happens. Excellent. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I invite the Chief Executive to give apologies.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We've received apologies from Councillors Bonney, Golding, Hall, Claire Martin, who will be online, Chris Palmer, Richard Palmer, Perkin, Booth and Neil.
Are there any others? Yep, Councillor Perkins online. No others? Excellent. So agenda item 3 is the minutes of the annual council meeting. Do members approve the minutes of the annual council meeting held on the 15th of May 2024? Minute numbers 1 to 4 as a correct record. Agreed. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations to make? Nope, nice and easy. So agenda item 5 is the Mayor's announcements. Given the length of the agenda tonight, I'm going to try and keep it as brief as I possibly can for you. Since taking the mayoralty back in May, myself and Deputy Karen have attended somewhere around 25 events across the borough and in neighbouring districts. Those have included several events on the Isle of Sheppey. I think I've spent more time in Eastchurch and Sheerness than I have anywhere else over the past month or so, and a pleasure it has been because it's a lovely part of the world. Also supporting a lot of community organisations at the Swales CVS event in Sittingbourne. We attended the Swale Pride at Sheerness, supporting the only candidate for Mr Gay UK from the South East, who's right here from Swale. So please do support Jordan if you get the chance. Information you'll see on the Facebook and the Instagram. We had the pleasure of attending Challenger Troops Awards, and I had the privilege of giving some of those awards out to the wonderful young people who are working so hard there, where I was joined by Councillors Stephen and Stephen, which is always nice to see. And of course, anybody who's seen me limping around, I'm afraid that is the fault of opening the tennis courts at Milton Regis. Very nice morning, but when they say, could you play a game of tennis and you're wearing your suit and shoes, don't do it, you will twist your knee. Very good facilities there, and excellent to see them all opened up. As I say, I was going to keep it as brief as I can. Hopefully, if we get through the agenda nice and quickly, the parlour is stocked, and I do welcome you to join me there after the meeting this evening for a wee tipple. Beyond that, I will also remind members that we do have the civic service this Sunday at St Michael's, and I look forward to seeing many of you there. Moving on to our next agenda item. Agenda item 6 is tributes to the late Councillor and Alderman Mike Henderson. Councillor Perkin, if you are able to hear us online and are able to dial in, I'm going to call upon yourself first.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Right. So I've read this out loud a number of times and have cried every time. So I will try and keep it together, but apologies if I don't quite make it. There are many things that I could say about Mike. He was a dedicated public servant, a kind and trusted mentor, a beloved father, grandfather, husband, and friend, a banger racer, a passionate environmentalist, a twitcher, a cigar lover, a coffee in the marketplace, newspaper, and flat cap, all over the details kind of guy, and someone that loved Faversham and especially the community of Priory Ward fiercely. It's horrible to have to do this at any time, but I'm especially sad that I'm not able to be present in the chamber to deliver my tribute to Mike in person. I'm also sad that Mike didn't quite make it to see the result of the general election. I'm sure wherever he is, he's absolutely delighted with the result. It is safe to say that I wouldn't be addressing you all as the leader of the Lib Dem group here if it wasn't for Mike. He taught me so much about how to be an effective advocate for the community, how to stand up for what was important to the people and that we represent, and how to take political jibes on the chin, and how always to put the people first. He built my confidence and resilience in a way that is really difficult to articulate, and a way that I wish I had told him more about before he went. I wanted to extend my thanks to everyone here that has reached out since his passing, to everyone that attended his funeral, which was a wonderful send-off. The community tributes to him delivered by former Faversham Mayor Alison Reynolds and the words of officers that I have been sent show how much he was valued by so many and the hole that he leaves behind. Our Liberal Democrat family won't be quite the same without him. His sage advice and the occasional summoning to Bridge House to be put right about something or another that we had got wrong. I'll leave you with just 2 points. Mike, we will miss you and thank you for all that you have been to the very many of us here, but especially my friends and colleagues on the Lib Dem benches. In the words of Charles Kennedy, the most special relationship, in my experience, are based on the combination of trust and mutual respect, and Mike had both in spades. Thanks for everything, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Perkin. Now call on the leader, Councillor Tim Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In this section I'll be fairly brief because I expand a little bit more during my leader's statement about Mike. But it's fair to say he was a unique individual, always wanting to offer his wise counsel, and meticulous about everything that went on in this chamber. He will be sorely missed by not just myself, but those young elder statesmen on the Labour benches and the newer members too. And we send our condolences to his family. As I say, he'll be sorely missed by us all in the Labour group. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Mike Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ideally, it would have been Monique speaking on behalf of our group tonight, because her and her and Mike were grouped together on this council long before I joined it. A Lib Dem, though he was an independent at the time, and Monique as an independent, formed their own groups, and between them effectively stitched up quite a lot of people from the Conservative administration in a very effective way. And although I was only able to watch it as a member of UKIP, I thought, that's how you do it. So my thanks to Mike for his for teaching me by experience how to really get to the nub of a matter. Most of us will, or many of us will know Mike for speaking at planning, where he had an extensive and in-depth knowledge of the subject and experience that went back decades. And it was quite interesting because when I was on here with UKIP, he was very keen to distance himself from UKIP comments, and he would often stand up and introduce his section with, "I would like to dissociate myself with the comments of a previous speaker," and then say exactly what I'd said, but taking a little longer. And I used to jibe him about that when he was one of the few smokers that we had. Good man. We were a dying breed. Shouldn't really say that. There's less of us. I think it's only me and Angie, and Dolly's not even here tonight. So there's few. Hiding up there. So it's one of those rare opportunities to talk to somebody outside and get his wisdom and insight on a subject without having to sit in the meeting and think, what the hell do I do next? But the best time I had with Mike was when we were doing the tourism scrutiny working group, which we had lobbied for, and then we spent it was about 6 months working on it. Going around his house, we went out and interviewed people who were involved in tourism, and that was a really enjoyable experience. And that was when I was able, to see behind the politician and see the man who Mike was and the passion that he had for the whole of Swale, but mainly Faversham. But we had that balance of the tourism. We came up with a really wonderful report, I thought, and I think it would be a nice tribute if we actually went back and revisited some of the stuff that he proposed on that, because it was a really constructive piece of work. So I feel this council's missed a lot with the passing of Mike Henderson. I think we've lost a lot of our corporate memory, we've lost a lot of our knowledge, and we've lost somebody who was very idiosyncratic, and we need more people like that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Now call on Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is always sad when we have to say goodbye to a councillor, but just a little bit harder for councillors for the like of Mike Henderson. Mike was a Liberal Democrat through and through, even when he said, when he sat as the sole Liberal Democrat and couldn't be an official Liberal Democrat, you knew where his loyalties lay. Now, I had the privilege to enjoy Mike's personality many times. As a new councillor, when I joined the chamber, he was welcoming and was one who put party aside when there was a good cause for residents that he could help with. He was a guide, a wealth of knowledge, cigar smoker, and a true gentleman who often has, as has been said, 2 points. You could rest assured that Mike not only read his council papers, he digested the content. If there was something not quite right or clear, he would find it and always put his opinion across in a friendly way. But woe betide you if you crossed him. And when he got the bit between his teeth, you certainly knew it. A knowledge that will be hard to beat. Sadly, over recent months, Mike wasn't the Mike we knew as his health deteriorated. But he still did his bit. And if I was wearing a hat, I would tip it to him right now. I learnt something about Mike at his funeral a few weeks ago, and that he was an avid bird watcher, which came as a surprise, and I've said this one before, as one thing Mike never did with council papers was wing it. I extend my group's condolences to the Liberal Democrat group, the residents of Faversham, and to Thomas Henderson and Mike's other children and family. Friendly, understanding, caring, knowledgeable, and a bloody good chap. That was Mike Henderson. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Now, Councillor Gould.
Thank you. I've really only known Mike since joining the council, but he's deeply impressed me. He deeply impressed me with his, as you say, as everyone else has said, his depth of knowledge and his real thorough reading of everything that came before us. It was an example, really, of actually preparedness and, as people say, tenacity and making the points. And it's example to newer councillors like myself about what we should perhaps aspire to in terms of actually getting to grips with the things before us. As people have mentioned, he was an environmentalist, supporter of Friends of the Earth, and a sign that those environmental issues cross party boundaries. He will be very much missed, and one can only admire his absolute tenacity and willing to come back and serve even after he had retired, when the call came, that he actually stepped up again and wouldn't stop serving. So it was an honour to know him, and as I say, condolences to his family and to all who knew him better than myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Would anybody else like to make a tribute? There are more hands. So I will now pop mine in, and do excuse me. So for me, I first met Mike before I was out of a pushchair. He would be around the house on a regular basis. Back when parts of St Anne's Ward were still part of Priory Ward. I'm thinking Oldgate Road, the Knoll. He would always pop up with the leaflets for the Knoll as soon as I was old enough to walk. At that point, it was a case of getting across town in the pushchair, and then I'd always get the houses with the big steps that you could just about get up, while Dad would do the low ones for Mike. Invariably, he would come in with the cigar on the go, always on the go, and it would be a sort of bounce as he walked in the door, and it would be, "Good to see you, Trevor. Really need you to get this done now." It was never a please at the start, until he tried it with my mother and got the answer of, if you don't say please, you can shove those leaflets right up your... Mike just laughed and apologised. Never said it, and it was never rude again in that manner to my mother. But without him, I certainly wouldn't be sat here. I think when we look back, it wasn't just those times as a youngster delivering leaflets. It was also, dare I say it, when you're acting as a runner from the tellers to the to our committee rooms. And Mike would saunter over to Watling Ward at about 5 o'clock and say, "You still telling? All my bods were out by 4 o'clock. See you later. I've just got to go back and give someone a lift at 9 for the last polls." He knew his ward that well. He knew when his vote was out before anyone else did. He was kind with it. He knew when to give advice, when to give you a stern word in the ear. I think we have to remember as well his other contributions and those other legacies. So he spent many years on the Member Development Working Group, developing the members' introduction packs that certainly we had in 2019. He ran some of the ideas that he had for those past those of us that were thinking about standing beforehand. He was keen to make sure that every voice was represented, and during that low point for our particular party between 2010 and 2015, he went out across Faversham to form the Faversham Independent Group to get people to stand for council, because it was tired of the potential of only having 5 candidates for 4 seats. And he supported people that he knew full well had completely different views from himself, but just to make sure that democracy had an opportunity and people had a chance to make a choice. When you look at his contributions on planning and particularly within his own ward, I think he's been an exemplar for all of us about when and how you speak with developers. Making sure that you get in early and you make sure that the developer is speaking with the community, working with the community and the developer to make sure that whatever planning application comes forward is as good as it can possibly be. You don't then have to support it when it comes to committee if you still think it's not right, but at least then you know if it goes to appeal and you lose, you've got a development you can live with. And that was a key thing that was brained in from Mike to all of us, and I think it's tantamount when you look at the All Gravel Works scheme, which was the last big one in Priory Ward that Mike was heavily involved in. It didn't receive a single objection from the members of the public when it came here. That is tantamount to the work that he did to make sure that it was an acceptable development, that it met the environmental standards and met the local need. And we need to think about that as we go forward. As I say, Mike was a kind and decent man, and he will be strongly missed. And I'm sure Tom and Toby and Julie, I know how difficult it's been for them. coming to terms with this over the last few months, and I'm sure all of us will wish them well. So I would ask members if they would wish to stand for a minute's silence to reflect. Thank you, members. Please be seated. So we move on to item 7, which is questions submitted by members of the public. I will just check, have we got any of the members of the public here who are asking? Given the quantum of items on the agenda this evening, all members of the public will be receiving a written response to their questions, and that will be included within the minutes. There were 11 questions that were submitted, and as I say, the responses will be minuted along with those questions, given that none of the members of the public are here to ask them tonight. I will therefore move on to agenda item 8, which is questions from members. A reminder that there's a 30-minute time limit on these particular ones, and please, if you have supplementary questions, make sure they are questions and they relate to the subject matter of the original question, please. I will ask each member their question in turn and invite the chair of the relevant service committee to respond. First question up is Councillor James Hunt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My councillor was to Councillor Rich Lehman, and it is, I have heard reports that the capacity of the new waste collection lorries are less than those which Biffa were using, resulting in additional trips to the waste transfer station and ultimately delays in collections. Could you please confirm the capacity for refuse and recycling and food waste of the old waste lorries and the new ones which the council have purchased, please?
Thank you. Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's difficult to make a complete comparison as the vehicles were not under Swales control in the old contract, and of course there are multiple elements that have meant a variation of vehicles was required moving forwards. This included a response to more parked vehicles on our streets following the pandemic, future government waste legislation changes, and being required to tip food at an alternative location over 3 miles away. However, we have confirmed with Suez that the capacity on the current vehicles is likely to be more. Our old vehicles were split back vehicles with 70% of the back compartment set aside for the main collection material, either refuse or recycling, and 30% for food waste. Our new vehicles are standard single back compartments which are bigger than the 70% compartment on the old ones. The new food pods are smaller than the 30% compartment on the old vehicles, but the tonnages of food waste collected both now and then show that both have remaining capacity within them. Therefore, the benefit of the new vehicles is actually fewer trips to the waste transfer station, as there is more capacity for the main collection material. The reports you have heard may have been in relation to early settings on the compaction rate in the vehicles. In each compartment are compactors to squeeze the material and create more space. Each vehicle has an adaptable compaction rate relevant to the type of material you are collecting. Suez were trialling different compaction rates in the early stages, but now believe they are working to the optimal setting.
Councillor Hunt, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Just one of the things that was said there was that Suez say that the capacity is likely to be more. That seems a little bit wishy-washy to me. And if that's the sort of responses we're getting from Suez when sounds like they haven't actually got a clue, does the chair of the Environment Committee think that that's sort of acceptable, or does he think Suez should be coming up with a lot more detail to when we ask questions?
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I'll refer to the first sentence of my previous answer, which is that it's difficult to make a complete comparison as the vehicles used by Biffa were not under our control. So it would be perhaps a little bit optimistic to expect Suez to know what those vehicles were as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Second question, Councillor Charles Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll do a substitute of wording, 'cause I've clearly incorrectly addressed it. So does the committee chair, I've written council leader, agree with the Liberal Democrat group that the council should set a date when people can expect the waste service to work properly, push Suez to compensate the community, and not pay Suez for work that has not been done? Thank you.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The council has been working to a recovery plan throughout the disruption. It's difficult to put a finite date on the day that service will get back to business as usual due to many factors that can impact that. However, almost every collection cycle has seen improved collection rates, and we know the distinct areas that we need to work on to get to that end position. Suez have acknowledged service levels have not been at the required standard during this period and have joined us in apologising to residents for the disruption. Their contract tender provided a range of commitments to give back to the community, and we will ensure that these are delivered at the relevant times. The contract ties all parties into a range of commitments. We are contractually obliged to pay the agreed sums to Suez. They have provided the required resources to deliver the contract, and therefore we will not be reducing any payments during the 3-month grace period. This period, which is industry standard for new contracts, shows that we were expecting a level of disruption. It allows time for services to be tested, changes trialled, and solutions found. But we will of course use our contractual rights now that we're outside of that period, and performance deductions will be made in accordance with the contract.
Councillor Gibson, did you have a supplementary? No. Councillor No? I think he's online for this, isn't it? Councillor No?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Sorry, just give me a moment here. This was originally addressed to the leader, but could go to Councillor Lehman if appropriate. It was well over 2 months before drivers were able to locate rural and other hard-to-find properties in Sheppey East and other areas, despite efforts to provide addresses, photos, and details. Could the leader please explain what induction or other information was provided to ensure Suez were familiar with the local area before the contract started, and why it took over 2 months to locate addresses?
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following the award of contract, Suez employed a mobilisation manager and brought in a range of services from their corporate teams: HR, IT, health and safety, finance, operations and fleet. They received data on the existing rounds and undertook route risk assessments where applicable. Furthermore, the majority of staff have transferred over from the old contract to the new contract. Therefore, Suez have utilised that local knowledge. As with any change of contract, it is hard to access staff too much before the transfer, as they are working on the delivery of the old contract right up until the day of transfer. However, Suez paid staff for a range of training events at weekends in the run-up to the start of the new service. With the major rerouting of the rounds, it was also difficult to have all of the old crews servicing the same areas. This meant that the local knowledge has taken longer to share than expected. Furthermore, company working practices may differ, and so new solutions have been needed for some harder to reach properties. Many of these issues have been resolved now, but we know that there are some remaining that still need focus.
Councillor No, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, please. Well, this does answer about what kind of induction they had. It does not answer the question of why it took over 2 months to locate addresses. So I will ask that part of the question again.
Councillor Lehman.
I think that's a fair question, and if I'm honest, I do share Councillor No's frustration with this, and as will be covered later on in the agenda, we will be undertaking a full scrutiny review of the mobilisation period, and questions like this will hopefully be answered during that process.
Thank you.
Next question is from Councillor Mark Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Things have gone wrong with the bin collections, that is plainly obvious. I've received numerous emails and spoken to various residents whilst personally emptying their bins. There have been pretty much no response or apology from the leader of this council when residents have complained via the various communication channels. Now is the time for the leader to make an apology to the thousands of Sheppey residents that this council has failed. Will the leader stand here this evening and make his apology this evening? And I would just add that since I wrote this months ago, he has apologised to me and several of my residents, but not the thousands of Sheppey residents. Thank you.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Tucker, for your question. Yes, it's absolutely vitally important that I apologise tonight to all the residents affected, not just those on Sheppey, by the disruption to the service that the contract began. I've seen the impact that this has made on many, many residents. From an early point in the disruption, I've been personally apologising to residents that contact me directly. Whilst it was right to go out in the name of the Environment and Climate Change Committee Chair, I was fully supportive of the public statement released joint with Suez on the 11th of April. This followed a meeting that I held with the Chief Executive of Suez, where I expressed our concerns and requested that we apologise. As an organisation, we've had a banner on our website acknowledging the issues and have tried our best to describe what we are doing to bring the service up to the required standard. I then jointly wrote a second apology via an open letter to residents on the 28th of May 2024, which was published on our website and social media. Whilst we've seen marked improvements for many residents in recent weeks, I know there are some who remain affected by inconsistent collections. So again, I make a sincere and heartfelt apology to all of those impacted. Thank you.
Councillor Tucker, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Our final question, Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question reads, was the new waste contract discussed at any committee meeting of the Environment Committee since May 2023? If so, which members of the administration checked and agreed the processes that have been introduced? Thank you.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The decision to award the contract was last discussed at the Environment Committee on 19th of December 2022. The Member Waste Working Group, which had cross-party invite throughout the tender and then mobilisation phases, had regular updates on progress and steered the officer work on mobilisation and communications. 2 all-member briefings were held on 25th of September 2023 and 26th of February 2024 in the run-up to the new contract, which updated all members, including those on the Environment Committee.
Councillor Bowen, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor, very quick one. So therefore, does the Chairman of the Environment Committee think it is wise for a working group not to report back to its committee?
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I'm very new to this, as you know. I did not think it was unwise for the working group to report back to the committee. As I stated in my previous answer, all member briefings were held which updated all members, including those members of the committee. The contract was created and awarded prior to this administration, and I feel that Environment Committee members had ample opportunity to be informed of the progression between the 2023 elections and the start of the contract. Thank you.
This concludes the members' questions. We'll move on to agenda item 9, the leader's statement. Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As we have a somewhat packed agenda this evening, I don't intend to engage in extensive discourse in my leader's statement. I would like to commence this evening by offering, not for the first time, a sincere public apology to all of our residents that have suffered a less than acceptable level of service during the commencement of our new waste and refuse contract. Frankly, there have been far more issues with it than any of us could have reasonably anticipated, and it is our intention to ensure that we put it right. We are, and always have been, fully committed to ensuring that the contract is a subject of thorough scrutiny to examine why we've experienced the difficulties that we have and to clearly identify lessons that are to be learned. I'd also like to take the opportunity to apologise to each and every one of you as members, as you have been the front-facing part of this for the organisation in what has been certainly a challenging time. It would also be remiss of me not to pay tribute to our officers, who have in a number of cases worked around the clock to resolve the issues, working way in excess of their contractual hours and responding to queries on their days off. Moving on, since we last met, there has of course been a small matter of a general election and a significant political changes both nationally, in the county and locally here in Swale. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate our newest Swale MP, Kevin McKenna, who of course was elected to the seat for Sittingbourne and Sheppey, a seat previously occupied for what seems to have been forever by Gordon Henderson. And I wish Gordon well in his retirement in whatever form that takes for him. My congratulations also go to returning MP for Faversham and Mid-Kent, Helen Whately, and I look forward to working with Kevin and Helen for the good of all Swale residents. On a personal note, I remember standing here almost exactly a year ago and stating that it was with a heavy heart that I would be commencing my leader's statement on that occasion. At that time, I recall saying that I sincerely hoped that I never again would have to stand before you all on an occasion where it befalls me to offer reflections on the passing of a serving councillor. However, that was not to be, and I had the sad duty but undoubted privilege of attending the funeral of Councillor Mike Henderson in June, who, as you've heard earlier, sadly passed away on the 29th of May this year. Mike has given selfless and unwavering service to the residents of Faversham for many, many years, and literally worked to the end, which bears testimony to his commitment. It is fair to say that Mike was a unique character, and all of you will have your own reflections and anecdotes to share, I'm sure. Suffice to say, his input in this chamber will be sorely missed, particularly his forensic analysis of every single document issued by this council, and he will have undoubtedly left a huge hole in his party's team. I'm indebted to the councillors that have spoken before, and in particular to Councillor Perkin for the moving tribute that they have paid, and to members of all groups for their kind words and like expressions of condolence this evening. And as I've said so many times, this clearly demonstrates that in this chamber, people transcend politics at the most difficult of times for us all. Moving on, there were echoes of Mike's commitment to public service, as well as unsung heroes were recognised and celebrated at this year's annual Civic Award ceremony. Every year, Swale Borough Council asks the public to nominate residents who work tirelessly to improve their communities, with the Mayor and judging panel having the unenviable task of selecting the winners from so many deserving nominations. The heartening thing about the awards was that all areas of the borough had worthy nominations, and I would like to congratulate all nominees, whether receiving awards or not. They were all winners in my eyes. There was, however, one notable recipient that I would like to highlight, that being Mr. Paul Murray, MBE, who received the Lifetime Achievement Award for tireless commitment to all things Sheppey and lifelong commitment to helping others. Paul was quite clearly a popular choice and received an enduring standing ovation. Finally, as summer is upon us and our heads turn towards holiday time, there are some excellent opportunities for healthy activities in Swale. And as we look to enjoy the sunshine and leisure time, it is with great pride that I'm able to announce that once again, we've been awarded Blue Flag status for beaches on the Isle of Sheppey. We've also teamed up with Peel Ports, HM Coast Guard and others to form the Swale Personal Watercraft Partnership to address issues of irresponsible and dangerous use of jet skis. In closing, I wish you, your families and all of our residents a great summertime, however you choose to spend it. But please, please remember, whatever you do, do it safely and considerately, but most of all, enjoyably. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I will now call upon the opposition group leaders who will have 7 minutes for the first and then 5 minutes for the Dem group. Thereafter we'll go to the other members. I may do it in a different order depending to try and get some balance between the two sides of the chamber, so bear that in mind, and you'll have 3 minutes each if you do choose to. So I'll call on Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and similar to the lead, I'll try and be brief. Slightly disappointed, but I pretty much guessed what was going to be to a certain extent in the leader statement this evening, but he didn't send it in advance, but that's fine. So it's not a lot in terms of Swale Borough Council has been happening that's a particular surprise, I don't think. On the election, not the result which everybody wanted. I respect it, that's democracy, that's one of those things. I wish the new MP for Sittingbourne and Sheppey well. Look forward to seeing him and being able to work constructively with him going forward for the benefit of the entire borough. I hasten to add, obviously, in terms of the election results, small turnout, disappointing turnout, and I think that's a message which we all, as champions of democracy, I think, there's a phrase, should be doing what we can to actually re-engage and get people to come out and just put that little mark in the box, whichever box they want to put it in, because, and I've said this many, many times, far too much was given and far too much was lost just to disregard it. I'm not going to go into the waste contract. That's coming up as the highlight of the evening, no doubt. Agree with you and congratulations about the Swale Awards and to Paul. And I echo also your comments about the blue flags. And again, that standard which we have had around the borough for a long time. Let's hope Southern Water also don't start putting foul things back into the sea, which they've done once or twice in the past. And as we've had recently in Tenham, a mysterious, unknown substance within the sewage works there. Not a clue, still. And my thanks to the local press for also picking that one up and helping. My final thing, and apologies, Leader, if you didn't mention it, but also my thanks to also officers for helping sort out, and a lot of us would have suffered from it, the recent issues regarding Facebook and the links to the Swale Borough Council website, which has caused a lot, and I mean a lot of aggravation, not only with councillors, but members of the public who've suddenly seen an algorithm, a computer package saying, "Thou shalt not pass." Oh, hang on, you did get past a few years ago, so I'm now going to delete it and start giving you warnings, and if you keep doing it, I might run the risk of actually shutting you down and shutting your groups down for holding and promoting the services of this council. Shame on Facebook. Glad we've hopefully sorted it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Mr.
Thank you. Councillor Charles Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the leader for his statement. I'd just like to thank the leader again for his apology about the waste. It's could not have come soon enough, and it is very well received, I know. I share Councillor Bowen's concerns about turnout, and I'd like to reassure residents that turning up and voting for any party, no party, scribbling profanities or doing anything, the profanities bring us a great deal of pleasure at the count and amusement on what can be a very long and tedious night. So please do turn up and take part, whether you are voting for a party or not. I would be remiss of me, of course, in my role as the Deputy Leader of the Liberal Democrat Group, not to congratulate Mike Martin, the county's first Liberal Democrat MP ever, on his election in Tunbridge Wells. And of course, we will work with all of Swale's MPs and across the county going forward. Would like to thank the former Mayor, Councillor Stephen, for the honour of being on her judging panel. We get to do a great many meetings in this building that range on a sliding scale from very fun to deeply frustrating, and that was at the very fun end, so it was truly a pleasure and one of the highlights of my year so far. So thank you for that, and thank you and congratulations to all of the winners, very well deserved. And finally, echo the leader's congratulations on blue flag status, but feel very important that we raise the green flag status that has been awarded to a number of our parks, particularly Orr Gunpowder Works and the Faversham Wreck for the first time ever. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Would any other members wish to make a response? So I've got Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, the general election was a little predictable, but that turnout in Sittingbourne and Sheppey was, as the previous two speakers have said, a cause for major concern. 51% in Sittingbourne and Sheppey, the lowest in Kent. It was the lowest in Kent in the Police and Crime Commissioner election as well. And in 2023, the turnout had dropped considerably since 2019. That has to be a matter of some concern to this council. I have raised the issue previously, and I'm glad that it's been raised by the other two group leaders, acting group leader, because I think it's something this council needs to look at. I think it's something this council needs to see what we can do to improve our engagement with our residents, because this is really appalling, and in places obviously it was even lower than 51%, because that was the average. So I don't know if the LGA can do something, if we can work with the LGA. I don't know what we can do, but I think this is not something that should go unremarked and left to drift, because to me it's one of the most important things that when we get elected as councillors, we actually have a sizable number of people supporting us. And at 51%, I don't think anybody could say that.
Councillor Worcester.
Thank you. In the leader's speech this evening was mentioned water safety, and I wanted to highlight for these members that are here present this evening that on Minster Beach today we had an incident that involved somebody getting into trouble in the water. And actually this is a good news story because we had 3 young people step forward who happened to be present. I've spoken to their parents and I've spoken to witnesses on the beach that absolutely said that these 3 young people stepped forward, stood up and done an amazing job. They alerted the emergency services. One of them entered the water to actually bring that person back to shore, and by all witnesses' accounts they've done a superb job, and I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight how very proud I am of them and their parents are of them, and as a community how we can see this potential in our young people going forward through the whole borough. So well done to those young people. Thank you very much for stepping forward today. Thank you.
I've got Councillor Clark and Councillor Jays. So Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's slightly off what the leader was saying in his statement, but I think it is relevant. At last week's audit committee, and this is the first chance I've had to raise it with the leader, members were of the opinion that we would like to ask the leader in his dealings with other council leaders throughout the county to write to our MP and or the Secretary of State responsible for planning to ask when we might be looking at the white paper going through Parliament, so that we can move forward with bringing forward our local plan. So if I could ask the councillor, if I could ask the leader if he would take that on board, please.
Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It'd be remiss of me not to praise Paul Murray, who will be entering his 50th year involved in Sheppey education come September. He's not even a resident of our borough, but he's the heartbeat of Sheppey. He's a serial trustee. He's on the youth club after KCC pulled out. He's a trustee there. Trustee at Age UK. He's also a trustee at Sheppey Matters. He's involved in every aspect of Sheppey's life, and I think we should praise him further at any chance we can.
See no more hands, so Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's taken a while to get through. I hope that I haven't missed this. Did I hear the leader mention the tremendous, over many years, problems that we had with the previous waste contractor? And did he also mention the months and months of problems that we had the last time that we changed the contract? I might have missed it.
No, I really can't see any more hands. So I'll invite Councillor Tim Gibson to respond to comments. You've got 3 minutes, apparently.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. And I've noted the comments of the leaders, particularly Councillor Bowen and Councillor Gibson, myself as well, of course. I've noted my own comments. I'm referring to Councillor Charles Gibson. And in terms of Councillor Baldock raised an issue about, and he copied me into an email, I think 2 weeks ago perhaps. So I spoke to the Chief Executive about it, and the Chief Exec has managed to get it onto the LGA agenda next week, and that's in terms of what can we do to try and turn around the poor turnout you know, in this borough in terms of the electorate. We do hold elections in schools and so on, and it is really, really difficult. I will declare an interest today because it's my grandson's 14th birthday, and at 00:02 hours this morning he became the youngest member of the Labour Party in this country. So there we go. We all have to try, and if we can get those people involved in politics at that early age, then we're building a future which will be democratic for us all. Otherwise, we'll have a democratic deficit, and I dread to think what's going to be happening. Councillor Clark, in answer to your question, yes. And Councillor Harrison, in answer to your question, no. So your ears are working, but I also note your points that not everything was rosy with the last contract. And in fact, I've had people who have contacted me, directly residents, who have said Biffa never ever missed a collection. And when I've said to them, well, hold on, I haven't got the emails to hand, but I'll go back within the last 18 months. 3 times you've contacted me to say my bins haven't been missed, and I know there's at least one member in here whose mother was on my back continually as a ward councillor, not leader, about her bins being missed week on week on week. And I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. That concludes the Leader's statement. We'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the motion to introduce overview and scrutiny committee to the to Swale Borough Council. A motion to introduce the overview and the scrutiny committee to Swale Borough Council has been received as set out on the agenda. Councillor Charles Gibson, I invite you to propose the motion. You have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to start by thanking my generous colleagues behind me for agreeing to second this motion. A mix of election-delayed holidays, becoming a grandma and serving our borough as mayor has left me with rather fewer colleagues than I anticipated when I wrote this motion in March. So thank you, Councillor Bowen. I'll not repeat the many benefits that introducing overview and scrutiny to our current system would bring, and the options it would provide to all councillors of all parties and none. They are laid out in the motion and elaborated in great depth in the reference provided. There are a number of other councils operating a committee system alongside some scrutiny function, either in standing committees or working groups, including Cheshire East, Kingston upon Thames and Brighton and Hove. Those familiar with political balance around the country might note that all of these examples have majorities from different parties, and that all 4 of the national political parties represented here are either in the majority or the second largest party on one of those councils. Useful to consider, I feel, in the benefits it offers to every councillor, regardless of partisan view. Those of you with longer careers in local government than I will also remember that all councils that maintained the committee system during the early 2000s had to do so with an overview and scrutiny function within it. I will finally add what this motion is not about. This is not a stick with which to beat a political opponent who we may disagree with, nor is it a tool to delay policies or much needed action. It is intended as a way to improve transparency, member and public engagement, and ultimately all of our decision making. The major advantage a standing scrutiny committee, which is pre-balanced and already timetabled and sitting regularly, is we would avoid the enormous challenges being placed on those colleagues, both officers and fellow councillors, who are taking part in the waste scrutiny contracts panel going forward, who I know are giving up a huge amount of time at very short notice, often in working hours, to do so. So I ask councillors to consider this motion in the spirit is intended, to make our councillors open, transparent, accessible and effective as it can be, so that we may all best serve all of our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Charles Gibson. Councillor Lloyd Bowen, I ask you to second the motion and ask if you wish to speak now or reserve your right.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I second the motion and I reserve my right.
Wonderful. I open up the debate to members to debate the motion. Councillor Winklis and then Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Chair. I personally can't see any point in setting up another committee to basically overrule an existing committee. I don't see any sense in future more bureaucracy, so I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I support the motion. I think it's one strand of the business we do here at Swale that's actually still missing, which is something I regret. When we set up the committee system that we now operate, of which I was an ardent supporter, one of the things that those committees are deemed to be able to do is to scrutinise. We had that there was some argument about that in the first instance, but we got that clarified by the Chief Executive. In fact, they were indeed scrutiny committees in their own right, and they could bring items forward and scrutinise them. I'm not aware of how many times, and perhaps I'll be corrected on this, other than when it's been raised at full council in this chamber, and we've had matters referred back to a committee asking them. I had one. It was a review of furniture on the and memorials on the seafront of the Leas in Minster and elsewhere in Swale. But that's the only one I can think of, and that came through this chamber. Others may have done too, but the scrutiny element of what the committees do seems to me to have taken a very much of a back seat, and perhaps it would be helpful if we had a formal process by which, other than coming to this full council, that we had a method of call-in that members could call in a decision made by councillors or officers on the council's behalf. So I'll leave it there. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Scrutiny is undoubtedly one of the most important roles of a council. And as Councillor Whiting said, it's part of what our service committees should be doing. If councillors are not happy of the way the service committee is doing that scrutiny, then we need to look at how we make the service committees do their jobs. I don't think the answer is to bring in, as Councillor Winkler said, a whole new structure. But I do think if people are feeling that way and that the service committees aren't working, and that is down to the members of those service committees to make them work, to make sure that decisions are held up for scrutiny, to make sure that items come back. I have the misfortune of not sitting on a service community. I'd got myself on regeneration and property, and tonight I'm taken off it. So I haven't experienced how councillors feel. But if this is something that is a widespread concern, then it is something that we in the Constitution Working Group can look at. It is something that we can look at as a council to see what we can do to help committee members raise these issues. So that, I think, is the way forward, to make the existing committees work better. We should always be looking to make them work better. But I don't think a scrutiny committee is the answer. So I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Baldock has said basically what I was going to say, which is that if the service committees aren't doing their scrutiny function properly, as Councillor Whiting quite rightly pointed out, then perhaps the answer is to make them do that. The solution to a problem should never be to introduce something else that's more laborious and will take longer. The answer is to fix the problem at its source. Quite frankly, I think the motion put forward tonight is a total waste of time and a total waste of money, and I won't be supporting it. Thank you.
Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I don't think this motion is a waste at all. I think it's come forward because there is a need for it. Whether that is because committees aren't doing what they should be doing, there is a need for more scrutiny on this council, and I think putting forward a proper scrutiny committee, as is the case on other councils that have committees, is probably the right thing to do. We've seen tonight already that we're talking about sewers and the waste contracts, and don't worry, there's going to be a committee put up in October, so it's actually specifically for scrutinising this. Well, that shows that we need scrutiny. So putting this forward, I'm pleased it has come forward. It's something that I will support. We need to be more open and transparent, which is what has been said in the past, that we are a council that's open and transparent. We're clearly not. As has been heard tonight with the waste contracts, the Environment Committee haven't spoken about it since 2022. Now, if there's working groups and everything discussing it, that's great, isn't it? All behind closed doors. And how many times have we heard that? All meetings behind closed doors. Well, let's start doing things in public so residents can actually hear what we're doing.
Thank you. Councillor Gould.
My contribution is more of a question, really, is that looking at the list of possible benefits in the motion, the only one that I'm not clear on that isn't actually really part of the existing committee's remit is the first one about the call-in process, and that's one thing I'm just not clear about what the call-in process is if our members are wanting to bring things to a committee. I don't know whether that's something that anyone could answer, but all of the rest of the bullet points in the motion, as far as I can see, are the sort of things that the committees should be doing in any event, and to have a separate committee to redo the work of the committee doesn't really seem to be worthwhile. A call-in process, I think that's something that maybe needs to be clarified about how things can get raised and onto the committee's agenda, other than, but what are the routes in which things can be put on there that would, when there is a serious issue that members would like to see discussed?
Yep. If you would like to answer that one, Chief Exec.
When we created the committee, the cross-party group that looked at it, looked at the call-in process. We don't have a call-in process, and the reason we don't have a call-in process is under the cabinet system, the decisions are made by one political party, and it can be called in for scrutiny. because the scrutiny happens within the committee, the decision is made by a cross-party group, then the requirement for, there's nobody really to call it in because everybody cross-party has had the opportunity on that decision. Some councils that have a committee system do have a call-in system, and we did explore that, and the way that it works is there's quite a high threshold for, it's really for something that other councillors bring up that maybe the committee hadn't considered that's significant, and in all of those cases the call-in decisions committee, whatever it was called, was tended to be made up of very senior councillors like group leaders, and it was quite a small committee, but the threshold to call something in was very, very high, whereas threshold on a cabinet system isn't. And the reason the reason you call in a decision is to have that scrutiny, overview and scrutiny, which we don't have because we have that scrutiny function of decisions. It's not just one political group that makes the decisions. The overview and scrutiny is kind of rolled into the committee system. But it is true that there are some councils that have the committee system that do have a call-in. It was considered by members on the Constitutional Working Group when we discussed this, and members didn't feel, at that time, I'm not saying it can't change, but members didn't feel it was something that they wanted for here.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I've got Councillor Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I'm largely in agreement with what Councillor Baldock and Councillor Gould have said, in that this proposal would sort of strip away an important function from the current service committees, and if anything, this should be something that we should be looking to strengthen, and maybe there's also a need to look at additional member training on scrutiny skills as well, so that all of us are able to fulfil that function to the best of our ability. And just bearing in mind, obviously, that this is a local authority where there's no majority control from one group. We have a committee system, so each individual member is probably more powerful in that regard than under any other sort of system. So there's the opportunity there to really strengthen this. And over the past year, the council has been making further adjustments constitutionally. There's been because the switch from one system to the other is huge. It's a big undertaking, not just constitutionally, practically and culturally as well. And the peer review has further brought to mind other suggestions for strengthening that, and did point out that there are good scrutiny work happening, for example, with the Health and Housing Committee. So I think the function's there. It does happen, but we do need to strengthen it. And I just remind members as well that we are always asked at our service committee meetings to look at the forward plans. We can all make suggestions at those meetings for stuff that we would like to see come back at a future meeting, and it can be discussed amongst all the committee members there and then.
Thank you. Councillor Tim Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I come from it at a, you'll be surprised to hear, more simplistic view, being quite a simple-minded character. We don't take cars off the roads if the drivers are speeding, do we? No, we address the speeding with the drivers. So that, to me, fundamentally aligns to what we're saying here. If we're saying we want the scrutiny, we don't think it's happening, so let's create another committee, that's not the answer. The training elements, which Councillor Wise just stole my thunder a little bit with, is a way in which we should be doing it. I still get complaints from members of all political parties saying we have too many meetings, we can't fit them in. I can't put people on that group, we can't attend that meeting, and yet here we are proposing that we have another committee, another layer, another strand for people to attend, and whether you like it or not, holding the fiscal purse strings as I do, there will be costs to this, and there'll be additional costs for officer time. These things just don't happen, and we all acknowledge the pressures that officers are under, and we're absolutely under the cosh for the work that they're doing. So I see no benefits to this at all, and I won't be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Simon Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I come at this from a similar position to the leader. I fully appreciate that we've got a lot of work on, and committees were postponed due to the general election, which didn't help our situation in the early part of this year. However, if we're looking at setting up another committee, we ought to look at our own committees first. Last week, my committee, the Audit Committee, we were just quorate because many members, for whatever reason, were unable to attend. Well, if they're unable to attend a scheduled committee meeting, what makes us think that they're going to be able to attend a further committee meeting that we've got to try and find things for? Again, yesterday at the Economy and Property meeting, there were a significant number of councillors who weren't in attendance. If the full committees aren't in attendance, then how can those committees scrutinise things properly? It's a one-sided bias thing, my committee, I can tell you, we do scrutinise the audit process very, very carefully. Firstly was my earlier statement to the leader, asking him to work with his colleagues throughout Kent. And the second one was on the communications strategy. My committee was of the opinion that we should actually call all those group leaders, the leader of the council, Councillor Baldock, Councillor Bowen and everyone else who's involved with that, to a special committee meeting to answer as to why this was still an outstanding strategy. But working with our internal audit partners, Miss Woodward came up with an answer after speaking, I believe, to Phil Sutcliffe, that this was still a work in progress that was interrupted by PERDA, and it would be worked on over the next weeks and go to P&R in September. So due to that, we decided that we wouldn't call it in, and we've emailed all members of the audit committee. So scrutiny in committees does work, but we need as many members of those individual committees to commit to turning up to them so that we can scrutinise things properly. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Mayor, I thought I would just be a bit blunt in words of one syllable here. When we had the peer review recently, they reported back that there was only one service committee on this council which did scrutiny. Guess which one it was? It was the Housing and Health, which started off under your good chairmanship and continued under mine. Now, part and parcel of how this happens properly is training. We need to badge the training better. Chairmanship training. Well, I'm not planning on being a chairman, so I'm going to go to it. When I did my initial training all those years ago with the union, it was how to be a chair and a proper committee member. Your role as chair and in the committee. So we all took turns at sitting up there and sitting here and barracking, basically. But it stood in good stead. Now, I've done, I don't know, 3 or 4 chairmanship trainings here in this council, and they're not badged properly. I do keep mentioning it, perhaps not loud enough, because people look at the heading and that's all they see. I don't want to be a chair, I'm not going to go. It is about your role in the committee and what you should be doing, which doesn't help if you don't bother going. Now, there are members in this chamber now who have been dragging themselves in when they were very, very recently at death's door. You know I'm talking about, but they managed to get themselves here. And that is called commitment. Sadly lacking in a lot of cases. Every committee I go to, there is always 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people missing. And it's bad, you don't even get a sub. and it really isn't on. Because how can you might as well say that they are one-party committees if you don't bother sending your group along. And I'm speaking through the chair, so I'm not looking at anyone. My view, as I have mentioned whenever I can, is that we have got too many committees. We've got 5 service committees, and my personal view is that there should be 3. And then that would allow proper support from the groups to be on it, but it would also allow free time for the working groups that these service committees have been setting up, which are actually very crucial. Most of them are, I was going to say job and knock. There is a better term, I know.
Task and finish.
That's the one, that's the one. But what we've got now is we've got 5 service committees, umpteen working groups, which don't seem to see any end to it. And it's like, well, you know, have I got time to go to work? So I really do think that that whole issue needs looking at. But as far as the motion before us, if we were doing our jobs properly, we would not need to set up yet another committee to do overview and scrutiny. I'm doing my job properly, as are the other people on housing.
3 minutes,
and health.
Councillor.
If your committee isn't, that's down to you. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I'm going to take Councillor Jays, and then we'll head back towards our seconder and proposer for summings. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Chair of the Members' Development Working Group, I've heard that members would benefit from scrutiny training, and we'll add this to the working group's next agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen, as the seconder, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a former chairman of the last scrutiny committee, no doubt I'm strongly in favour of this motion, and here's why. A number of people have spoken this evening who've never, ever experienced council working with a scrutiny committee. It took us as a council, when we did change the committee system, the best part of a year to decide whether committees can scrutinise or not. So it's hardly surprising when we're down this far down the road that we're still not sure. And I applaud Councillor Harrison if she does it in her one. But firstly, a scrutiny committee provides independent oversight within the complex structure of the council and our committee system. I think it is essential to have a dedicated body that independently reviews decisions and policies where required of committees. This oversight helps ensure that all actions taken by various committees align with the community's needs and legal standards. Secondly, it enhances policy development. Scrutiny committee can be meticulously examine subjects, be they existing policies, decisions or proposed changes, providing insightful recommendations for improvement. This thorough review process helps refine policies, making them more effective and responsive to community needs by identifying strengths, weaknesses. Committee contributes to more informed and robust policy making, ultimately leading to better governance. Thirdly, a scrutiny committee fosters transparency. One of the primary functions of local government is to serve the public openly and honestly. The scrutiny committee's activities are often conducted in a transparent manner, with findings and recommendations made publicly available. This openness helps build public trust and confidence in local government, as residents can see the decisions that are being made fairly and with due diligence. Furthermore, it provides a platform for continuous improvement. By having the ability to independently review and assess the performance of various departments and committees, the Scrutiny Committee identifies areas for improvement and encourages the adoption of best practice. This ongoing evaluation will help this Council to adapt to the changing circumstances and continually strive for excellence in service delivery. Lastly, and vitally, a Scrutiny Committee acts as a check and balance within Swale Borough Council. It ensures that no single committee or department operates without accountability, promoting a balanced distribution of power. This balance is crucial for maintaining a fair and just governance system where all actions are subject to review and scrutiny. In conclusion, a scrutiny committee within the committee structure of the local government brings numerous benefits. It provides independent oversight, policy development, transparency and continuous improvement. It acts as a vital check and balance. By integrating the scrutiny committee, Swale Borough Council can achieve more effective, accountable and responsive governance, ultimately serving the community better. Now, I'm not convinced that the scrutiny doesn't, in my view, it doesn't need to meet that regularly, but as and when required. This will be where you and I have concerns on topics where we think this needs separate eye to look at it. It's not a case of, as has been said, of a waste of time at all. It is not there to replace a committee. It is not there to change decisions, but rather put on a temporary break to make sure decisions are the best they can be. I urge members to pass this motion and refer to the various personal and constitution and refer it to the various personnel and the Constitution Working Group to accommodate it within the Constitution and make Swale Borough Council better as a result. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Charles Gibson, as the proposer of the motion, do you wish to sum up the debate?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have not a great deal to add to Councillor Bowen's excellent summary. I would only respond to a few of the key points. I disagree strongly with Councillor Gibson. We don't take the car off the road when somebody's speeding. We do put up a lot of speed cameras to restrict their ability, and we take away their licence when they do it wrong. That is what this is equivalent to. We strongly need to consider this option. It is evident in the Chamber today that it may not be a single political party making a decision, but it is a single alliance, and that alliance has a majority on every service committee. As a person who often disagrees at service committees, they can and do overrule that scrutiny and the ability for it to happen. Those decisions are made behind closed doors. I called out the inclusion of that alliance's meetings on a public paper as inappropriate. We all agreed it was inappropriate because those meetings are being held in private. They are not public meetings and they are not open to residents. When I'm speaking to my residents in Faversham about what they get from Swale, the service they get from this council and the view they get of this council, it is not a very transparent and open council. It is a council where things are done behind closed doors, where things are not open, and where services are not delivered with their best interests at heart. I would like to draw our attention to a singular policy that was worked upon for an entire year by a policy working group, a detailed parking review that went through an enormous amount of public consultation and huge work by members, and then was, on a whim in this chamber, changed, having budgetary implications. So that was never scrutinised. That may or may not be the best policy, but we really have no way of knowing if we're making the best policy if we make it on the hoof in this chamber without consultation and in disagreement with the recommendation of our working groups. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. So we will now move to the vote, members. It is by a show of hands. So first of all, can I ask those who are in favour to raise your hand clearly, please? And could I ask those who are against, please? Thank you. And any abstentions, please? That motion is defeated. Have you got the numbers? Don't need to give the numbers. Excellent. Members, we've been going at it for nearly 90 minutes. It is exceptionally warm in here, and I think the next item may well go on for quite some time. So I suggest we take a 10-minute break at this point. Please be back here for 25 to. Please be seated, guys. Hopefully you've all had a chance to cool off a little bit there. We'll be moving straight into agenda item 11, which is the waste contract. I will invite the Chair of the Environment Committee, Councillor Lehman, to speak and propose the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'd also like to give a quick thank you to Councillor Harrison, just tying in some of the things that have happened this evening. Councillor Harrison for a live demonstration in her response to the leader with a demonstration of corporate memory in terms of reminding the Chamber of what happened at the early days of the previous waste contract. As is stated in the report, this debate was triggered following a request from the Conservative group back in May. Sadly, that was postponed because of the snap general election, and the busy meeting agenda since then, or diary since then, has meant that it hasn't been able to be raised until this evening. Some of the questions raised at that time are answered in the agenda papers, and others were answered in the question and answer session earlier this evening. And I'm sure many more will come forward during this debate, and I will be taking notes. Just to ensure everyone in the room is on the same page, paragraph 2.6 of the report in front of us states that the Environment Committee was due to discuss a proposal for a full scrutiny review at its meeting last week. This proposal and the scope for it were agreed unanimously at that meeting, and the review will be commencing in early August and running through until October, with the results of that process being shared at an extraordinary Environment Committee meeting in November. The public will be invited to take part in this process, and details of how to engage in the review will be shared in the coming weeks. It's clear that the months since the waste contract changed hands have not been good, and I sincerely hope that the scrutiny review will get to the bottom of exactly why things went wrong and ensure that the same mistakes are not made again in the future. What's also very clear to me, perhaps not so much to everyone in this room, is just how hard the Council's officers have worked to try and get every one of these issues fixed. On a number of occasions, I've received emails and messages about or updates about queries I've sent, and received them at 11:30 at night, sometimes on a weekend, on a Sunday afternoon. I've also seen firsthand the frustration of officers when the same issues are being raised again and again with the contractors, and proposed fixes are either not being put in place by them, or their fixes prove to be ineffective and fail to resolve the issues. As I shared at the Environment Committee last week, I myself have a bin complaints email folder, which at that time had nearly 1,200 emails in it. 8 days later, and it's now approaching 1,300. Between responding to emails around bins and attending meetings about them, I estimate I've spent somewhere in the region of 200 to 300 hours since late March dealing with this. Many of our officers have spent significantly longer than that. That all being said, I'm sincerely sorry to every single resident who feels let down by the poor service which our contractors have delivered over the past 4 months. I hope that the answers provided this evening and the upcoming scrutiny process will go some way towards softening the levels of anger and frustration that I'm sure many residents currently feel, and I hope that the findings from that process will be recorded to ensure that this doesn't happen again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. I will now invite the Vice Chair of the Environment Committee, Councillor Worcester, to second the recommendation and ask whether she wishes to speak now or reserve her right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second, and I reserve my right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish this conversation would have been had several weeks ago, but someone next door to this council had other ideas, so here we go. Almost 4 months since the introduction of the new waste contract, and to suggest it has been anything short of a failure really isn't in tune with their wards. I suspect not one single member in this chamber can say they have not had multiple occasions of failures to the service. Failures in every single aspect of the new, better service. Communications, letters sent out with incorrect information on. Website crashed. Website displaying incorrect information. Contact with the council. People calling and not getting a response, and where a response was meant to be forthcoming, time and again wasn't achieved. Numerous comments from residents of saying they were cut off. Data management, properties not included on data sets for waste collection, changes to routes, food waste missed, green bins missed, brown bins missed, blue bins missed, time and time and time again. A vehicle fleet that was meant to be new yet seems to have a very high frequency of failures. Staffing issues with the supplier, staff going AWOL. Information passed to the officers and passed to the contractor, which often seemed, by the contractor, to go into limbo. And the response from the administration was, I'm sorry for the issues, 2 to 3 weeks into the disruption. And then a second, we understand people's frustrations, apology by the leader. Sorry, pathetic. This administration is responsible for this. As a member-led council, the buck stops with us, and you are the groups that decides what this council does, or in this case, doesn't do. I see members of the coalition criticising the service. It's not good enough. Passing the buck, but I say again, this is on your watch. You are the administration that decided on how this contract would work. Where was the overview? Where was the scrutiny? Where were the questions asked on how things will work? Yes, there was a working group, but a working group should not be making decisions, or at least frequently reporting back to the committee that established the group. And yet we know there has not been a report to the committee on this subject since the 19th of December 2022. I see no evidence that the working group asked important questions of who, what, why, where, but it reads as read, it seems. I'm not blaming officers here. This is a member-led council. So would anyone like to apologise and tell the people that things will be resolved? To Miss R, who said bins not collected on Donald Moore Avenue. To Mr W, food waste not bin not emptied. 10 properties at Bogle. Mrs H, who didn't have a collection for 13 weeks.
Councillor.
Not good enough. I've got one paragraph. I welcome the scrutiny has been called through October.
It's up to the mayor.
I think this is far too late. I've got just a couple of lines. And this should have been done and called for by the chair of the committee weeks ago. It shows how distant the administration is when they cannot see what is happening and rely on other councillors to say enough is enough and demand a meeting. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. Gave a little bit there for you. Councillor Charles Gibson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Bowen is welcome to borrow some of my time. I'll be much briefer. He's outlined in great detail the many and varied challenges, and I look forward to the outcome of the Scrutiny Committee. I am delighted that in this specific instance, if not in principle, we are supporting the active overview and scrutiny, and I know Councillor Perkin will ably voice the righteous indignation that the residents of Faversham feel towards this catastrophic failure, and I think that is the context in which we need to think of it. My question on this report, which is unclear, is it says we are contacting and extending the contracts of our garden waste subscribers. Have we told them that? Because my narrow routes in Faversham, who pay, are still complaining. Many of them have had not a single garden waste collection and are not aware that they've had their subscriptions extended. So what are we doing about that in particular? And I, as I say, look forward to the scrutiny outcome and wish we'd had this meeting several months ago when it was first proposed. But as we have now got to a place where the scrutiny committee is happening, I look forward to its outcome. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Gibson. I will now open up the debate to members. Please indicate if you wish to speak. Right, so the first hand that I saw was Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think for our residents this has been nothing short of a catastrophe. Nearly 40,000 reports, it says in the report, of missed bins, not including those, of course, who didn't report or who gave up trying because of the IT. I had one man who waited over 3 months for his bins to be collected following the change to sewers, hundreds who waited weeks, and many more who contacted me only in the last few days that are still waiting weeks. The complaints drop in my inbox daily, as I'm sure they do for others. And at one point in April, I was receiving a rate of 1 per minute. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just pay tribute, if I may, to the staff that have dealt with my hundreds of reports and emails, particularly, if I can, Leanne, who has been excellent in her actions, getting bins put on catch-up lists for me, even if Suez then didn't always go on to complete those catch-up lists. I think she shares our frustration. This report actually tells us nothing, Mr. Mayor. Swathes of it appear to have come from a Suez management manual with phrases like, "This aids the process of miscollections to be collected in the most efficient manner." Well, Mr. Mayor, try telling that to my residents, whose missed bins then fell off the catch-up list, whose green bins were collected but their food bins left to rot in the sun. At the start of this fiasco, one road, Hilda Road, in my ward, was left out to dry. Officers were told bins had not been left out. But there were videos of the bins on the pavement with the bin lorry racing past at speed, not stopping once. Things got better for a few weeks, but again, this Monday, I was sent a further video from Hilda Road showing more bins on pavements uncollected, while our officers again were being told that those bins had not been collected because they had not been left out on the pavement. Communications, Mr. Mayor, really do have to improve between Suez and our officers if we start to build some trust and gain the trust of our residents. Mr. Mayor, the request for this debate asks that we agree any additional measures to address the issues. And I'd hoped the report would suggest ways in which we might get back on an even keel, but there's nothing. Perhaps we're being asked to accept the current situation is the new norm. Perhaps things won't get any better and we're supposed to tell our residents that. I do hope not. At the moment, all I can tell my residents from this report, whose bins continue to sit on the pavement uncollected, all I can tell the residents whose brown bins are broken and not replaced for up to 9 weeks, is we had a meeting, we discussed a report which said traffic is still high, the call centre remains busy, and we're going to have another meeting. Mr. Mayor, we need urgent action from the administration to provide the improvements our residents rightly demand and rightly deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. I'm going to come across to Councillor Nundy next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It is clear, as has been stated already, that the new Suez contract has been an absolute failure to our residents. I've been contacted numerous times by, I mean, Councillor Lehman said 1,300. I don't think I've quite had that many, but I have had a substantial amount. Now, in the implications section of the report, environment and climate ecological emergency. One of the key benefits of the contract was the environmental gains we will make on the service's carbon footprint. I understand that with some of the new vehicles and bits and bobs like that, that may reduce the carbon footprint, but what about all the rubbish that's been billowing through streets? What about the festering waste that's been left on our on footpaths across Swale, particularly on the Isle of Sheppey? And I know that some streets in Sheerness have had literal litter flowing down the streets where the bins just aren't being collected on time. This is completely unacceptable, and I'm talking on behalf of my residents when I say that this is an absolute failure and needs to be addressed as soon as is possible. Another point that is noted in the implications is under equality and diversity. So the disruption will have impacted some of our more vulnerable residents assisted in clinical collections. The administration made it clear that these need to be prioritised throughout the disruption. Well, I've had, in my ward, there are lots of people that are elderly, there are lots of people that have got disabilities, and they have been really negatively affected by this shambolic service that they've received, and that needs to be looked at, as I said before, as an absolute matter of urgency, because earlier on we were talking about why people don't vote. Well, they vote. The one thing that people see their council tax being spent on a regular basis is waste collection. Is it any wonder that people didn't vote in the last election?
Thank you. We'll head on to Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. When this was delayed from a full meeting, I was a bit concerned because this was going on and on. This was March that these problems started. And the council, to me, just didn't get a grip of it. The officers have been absolutely amazing in the cleansing team. I can't fault them at all. They've been doing everything they can, and I know, as others have said, they have been working when they shouldn't be. And it's been amazing. And it is down The failure here is the management at Suez and the leadership on this council. Members are overseeing this, or they should be. As we heard, the committee hasn't even seen anything since it's started. But it can't be going on, and here we are, this paper delayed, but we have still got the problems. And it has been said earlier by the leader, some residents are having inconsistent collections. No, every single ward is having inconsistent collections still. I've still got whole roads being missed every single week, and it's not good enough. It's good that there is going to be some scrutiny on this. We need to remember that some of these crews working for Suez and with Biffa, they are as frustrated as well. They're trying to do their job and they're not because of management and lots of different things that we're being told. And some of these are our residents, well, a lot of them probably our residents that are working in these situations and having to deal with this. Residents talk, and some of the things that I've been being told by residents are majorly concerning. I hope that these sorts of things will be picked up when it is scrutinised. Things such as Suez being £600,000 over budget in 3 months that they started, because they are paying time and a half when they're doing catch-ups to crews. They are having to pay out more and more money. Now, what is going to be happening with that sort of money? Are they going to be coming back to us? Is our contract as tight as it can be that we're not going to be having extra costs? I was told that they're ready to go on strike because Maidstone and Ashford staff are getting more per hour than they're being paid in Swale. If we start to get a strike situation, we will be in a massive problem. We think we've had problems so far. You will see nothing if that happens. So I hope that any leadership that is looking at this, if that is the sort of thing that's being considered, we need to be getting a grip of it. Some of the crews I've heard this week, people reporting their missed bins, and when they've gone out to crew because a neighbour has had their bin picked up, they've been told, well, we can't take yours because you haven't reported it, and they have reported it. There's still problems with the systems.
Time, Councillor.
Isn't working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Some of you may know that I'm a very highly qualified transport manager, national and international freight, national and international road passenger, with considerable experience. I offered my services because, to my mind, the system that they're operating with all their computers and things like this doesn't work. It needs a far simpler system. I operated an awful lot of vehicles, and it needs a very simple system, street by street. I did it years ago with Road Passenger, where we gave route cards to the staff, and there's no excuse. I've had people saying, "Oh, the lorry drove by because the bin wasn't on their computer." I had the churchyard in Minster saying, "Oh, it needs a postcode." And I said, well, I don't think a churchyard, I don't think the residents would be that interested. But anyway, some neighbour, fortunately, does wheel the bin over for us. But, you know, I've offered my services for nothing. I don't want anything, but I'd be very happy to meet with the transport managers of the company, Suez, because I can probably talk to some sense to them, and I've got you know, years and years of experience. So it isn't working, and their system is absolutely ridiculous. It just slows the whole process up because they have to put something in their computer system, and you wait till the Chinese turn it off. Thank you.
Councillor Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you for allowing my leader the extra time on this crucial matter, and I thank you for that. Moving forward, in regards to social media and how this council's dealing with this, for example, the seagull and the chip incident that happened while this was going on, the public are just laughing at this council when they should be concentrating on these bins and why is there swallows in the logo and all these other sort of stuff. We need to be focused on this issue until it's resolved. I know other things still need to function, but we need to concentrate fully on sorting these bins out so residents have more confidence in this council. Finally, I've read the report. It's mentioned, I think, in risk management and health safety, major contract failure, etc. What happens if the stakeholders are Suez and we keep finding them, or they keep going over budget and think we're going to have to pull the plug on this, pay the millions of pounds get out clause? What would happen? Has that been considered? Because I think it's a real possibility that could happen to this council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. We've now got Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge what Councillor Whiting and a couple others have said about our staff. I would like to add a recommendation, if I may, to the report, to just to congratulate and thank our hard-working staff on all that they've done, because I've been getting phone emails at 11:30 at night, way beyond what they should be doing. I've told a couple of them off, so it's 9:30, you go to bed. So with their agreement, I would like to make that an amendment, that we add that as an extra recommendation, that we thank our staff. Thank you. And we've got to face up to where we have failed as well, because this is, let's make no bones about this. This is an abysmal failure of a service, and our reporting is adding to the frustrations. It says in here, measures to compensate garden waste subscribers, where people have made us aware of issues. We've extended their subscriptions. But there have been times when people have tried to get in and they can't get through. There have been people who tell me they have reported it and they didn't get an extension. I've reported that into officers and they've sorted that out. But it's not a proper process in place, and we need to look at that. We need to look at where we can make things better. But it's very easy to throw stones. It's easy to throw stones at something that is really almost totally out of our control, because we feed stuff in, the officers feed stuff in. But if only we'd have had that foresight. If only in those working groups we could have seen the future and made the changes in advance. Not that it would have helped much from the Conservative group, as they never bothered to attend. So their wisdom now is very retrospective. And why is it that all these ideas are coming forward? But we have regular weekly meetings with group leaders. Where is the rescue that's coming from the Conservative group whilst they sit there and attack us, the administration? I didn't heard those jewels. I haven't heard that wisdom. Because if we'd have heard it, we could have acted on it. But no, you sit and throw stones. I don't blame you. It's an easy target. It's an appalling service. But don't be hypocrites. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. The comment that's just been made has not just been made by this party. Other members, also the administration, have also been critical of the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bowen. I think everybody has been critical of the service at some point. I believe there was a proposal in there for adding the additional recommendation for thanking the officers for their hard work. That was duly seconded by Councillor Whiting. If everybody's in agreement rather than taking a full vote, yeah, no one's going to object. Excellent. We'll add that on then. So, is anybody else wishing to speak? Ooh. Stunned silence. Right, so there we go. Councillor Paul Stephen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think when we're looking at the problem of this situation, it's not just down to Swale Borough Council, and it's not just down to Suez, it's not just down to the guys that work for Suez. It's the system that they are trying to introduce. Now, this has happened to me. I used to work for British Telecom, by the way, and they went computerised and they went and gave everybody a little handheld monitor that says, this is where your next job's going to be. It didn't work. It took years to get it right. And these were guys that knew, or supposedly knew, a little bit about electronics and computers. You've now given a working group of, and I'm not going to run them down for what the job they do, but they have probably never held a laptop or a Palm top in their hand and had to go through a system that is obviously not working properly, and then end up going down a street, as I said, and not stopping at that house because it's not on the system. A little bit of common sense there, I thought, would have been much more achievable, better, but it's management, and I've gone through this, and it's a very painful process, and I cannot see that it's going to improve in the very near future. Ideally, it should have been done gradually. It should have been take over the new contract, collect the bins first, and then find a way of improving it, rather than jumping in at the deep end and actually trying to give guys a computer printout or telling them that's the only road you're going to do and these are the only house numbers you're going to do. It's made things 10 times worse. It's the senior management at Suez that have caused this problem. I've seen, as I say, I have seen this before, and it is very, very painful for those guys working out on the road and for the people that they're serving. So, as far as blaming the administration and blaming Swale Borough Council, I think we should go back to them and get them to actually review the way they've actually approached this, because they thought that AI, computers are the way to do it. But you're dealing with human beings. You're dealing with people with experience, because all these guys work for Biffa, and yes, I know quite a few of them, and they've come to me and they've said they are so fed up with it and they're leaving in their droves because they cannot deal with the situation. So before we start blaming anybody, let's look at the real problem that's with Suez. We've just inherited that. Thank you.
Councillor Shield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'd just like to add to what Councillor Stevens has said. I know quite a few of the operatives that are out on the streets working day in, day out for our residents, and actually some of the residents' behaviour towards those operatives haven't been the best. I know some of them that have changed their dog walking routes, the times that they go out, the places that they shop, for fear of people actually verbally and physically attacking them in the streets. It isn't their fault. They're working extremely hard in extremely exceptional circumstances to deliver a service that they are struggling to get the information from their contractor from. Just because I do silly things, since the contract started, we've had 96 members of staff off sick. Out of reported numbers of rounds to councillors from our daily emails, there's been 1,259 rounds. Only 402 of those were reported to be 100%. Cart breakdowns, 47. These are brand new carts that we've spent millions and millions of pounds on, and continually we end up, by the end of the week, having at least 10 food pods out of action by Friday. These are staff that are dealing with breakdowns, failures in equipment. It's not their fault. And actually, we're thanking our staff. We should be thanking the operatives as well, who are working extra hard to catch up and help residents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
I thought I should support Councillor Stephen as a self-confessed dinosaur. I suggested that they have street maps. 3 months later, they've got street maps. It does work. There's clearly a problem. It's gradually getting better. What doesn't help is the abuse that our staff have had and that the Suez staff have had. It might make you feel better to shout and rant and rave down the phone, or actually in their faces on the street. But I can tell you now, if that was me, I'd be walking off, and some of them have. That you don't go to work to be abused. And, you know, if the rest of the street missed their bins because you had to take it upon yourself to go and have a rant, then that's down to you. And that has been increasing all the way through. There is no excuse. I know that there is an issue, and our staff and our members, our administration have been working on it. But as I mentioned earlier, the last contract wasn't hunky-dory, and the last time under the administration across the room, when we changed a contract, that was mega problems. And I do remember these things. But, you know, we all held to the line, it will get better. When this settles down, there will be a much better service. As long as this technology thing works at the end of the day. But some of the things which our residents have been getting away with blue murder for many years, 15 years at least, is all, you know, it's going to stop. One of the rounds that we heard, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, it was the brown bin, green waste. 150 photos were taken on a round of contaminated bins. So no, your bin didn't get emptied, love. And there was a photo and there was a little sticker on it, contaminated. We never had that before, whether it was a brown bin, a green bin is okay, a brown bin or a blue bin. That impacts on our recycling credits and all the rest of it. And of course what doesn't help is that we lost nearly 300 grand. Colleagues in this room supported taking that money off us for recycling. And change where we drop off the food waste at the last minute, well after the contract had been issued. So, you know, there are some things which Suez really needs to actually take on board, that we know our areas much better than you and your little bit of
Time,
technology.
Councillor.
Try listening. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. I've got Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, we had a situation in Milton Regis last week where the vehicle was booked to go on catch-up last Saturday. It got partly round, about a quarter of a third away round the route, this particular route. I was getting emails coming and asking questions why it hadn't been completed. I actually went out myself and walked the route to prove what hadn't been done, so I know what I was talking about. I contacted the Waste Department on Monday morning, and to back up what the two previous speakers have said, the waste disposal men were verbally threatened and the vehicle was in danger. And when they contacted their supervisor, he said, get off site. So that was the situation in Milton last week. There was threats from these particular residents, quite dangerous apparently. So you can't blame the refuse guys by their supervisor clearing the site.
Thank you, Councillor Winklis. Councillor Simon Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to offer my praise to our officers. There has been a little bit of a dip in responses to emails over the last week, I've noticed, when I've been emailing in problems that residents have contacted me about. I have to praise the workforce that are out on the coalface, so to speak, for Suez. They are doing their absolute utmost, but when they are being bullied into going out after their finish time by senior management, I don't see that as a professional outfit at all. They really need to look at the management style that they're using there. The senior management are bullying the junior managers are bullying the workforce, and no one will bother to sort it out. The unions have been absolutely frantic in there trying to sort this out. The management won't meet with the workforce to discuss ways of solving the problems. They're just told if it's not on your PDA, it don't get done. When this contract, and I don't want to diss the workforce too much because they are the stars, I think, but when they were first trained or went to Detling, I believe it was, for their training, there was a few PDAs that were available. They were just chucked in front of the workforce and told to have a play with them, see what you make of them. There was no proper training for the workforce of how to use those PDAs and how to go through all the particular menus within the sub-menus within the sub-menus. This is why you've got problems with parts of streets being collected, parts of streets being cleaned and parts not. You've got parts of roads being cleaned but little cul-de-sacs off, not being cleaned because they're not on their PDAs and they're not allowed to do them. As Councillor MacDonald said, I have offered my services of 35 years within the transport industry to try and work with Suez and our officers to bring a resolution to this. It's fallen on deaf ears. Well, I don't think I need to say any more, Mr. Mayor, but the culture down that we've had, if those members that were in the chamber earlier for the briefing by Mentalk, and Councillor Stephen will back this up as well, we've had members of Suez's workforce coming to our regular meetings and coming on our WhatsApp groups nearly in tears because they want to do their work but they can't because they haven't got the tools to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I've got Councillor Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the questions and points raised by the opposition benches, I do believe, come from a position of wanting to get the answers and solutions for the failures that I know we all hoped were long behind us and sadly continue to affect our residents. But I am 100% certain that the sorts of points that are being raised are all things administration members, senior officers and cleansing staff have been raising in their dealings with Suez from the moment there started to be issues with this contract. I'm 100% certain that's been the case. There have been some changes made, and you can see that's a result of what's been feeding in through that process. There have been extra resources of rounds on some days. There's reviews of some of the rounds. There have been adjustments made to some of the narrow rounds and so on and so on. It's all the stuff that gets described to us in our regular updates. But I still share everybody's frustration that we still haven't got there. And so I do think that all of the points being raised obviously come from that perspective of wanting to finally get the service that obviously all of us and all of our residents expect to get. And when we thank our hard-working officers who have worked so hard, and I know that is acknowledged right the way across the chamber, we do, I hope, I think, have to consider the impact that the hollowing out of local government has had over the last 14 years. It's been hollowed out at every single level. Our workforce is so much leaner than it used to be, and I am sure that unfortunately this has also had an impact on that team having to work the way they have had to work so hard, responding at all times of day, at the weekends, so that we can have that confidence that they are doing the very best they can to get this contract working for us. And I'm sure that that would probably be looked at as part of the scrutiny process this summer, which I very much welcome.
Anybody else like to speak before I go back to our seconder who reserved their right? No, we are there. So, Councillor Worcester.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank members for bringing their points to the meeting this evening. I do hope that we will see the same gusto and the same commitment to the scrutiny process going forward. Everybody has the opportunity to contribute on behalf of their residents because the scrutiny panel is cross-party, very similar to the Waste Working Group that has been cross-party. I'd like to remind members that actually it's a big undertaking for this council to take part in a trial authority contract, very big contract, and things are getting better. And I think if we really look at this closely, I have been disappointed to see the waste contract being used as somewhat of a political football, when actually we have some of the most vulnerable residents expecting our councillors to work together, whether we're opposition, whether we're administration. The outcome for these residents is all that matters. So I look forward to the scrutiny panel and I look forward to things getting better. In reality, I think no bin contract has ever been 100% perfect. So I have a realistic viewpoint with regards to this contract and its outcome. And that does not mean, however, that I do not expect the very best value for money, and I do not expect anything less than the best service this council can provide for every single resident, whether they vote or not, what party they voted for. This is their council and they deserve what they pay for, which is absolutely a decent service. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Worcester. I'll invite Councillor Lehman to respond and sum up if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In response to Councillor Bowen, there's just a point of clarification regarding the contract being agreed by this administration. That's not quite right. The tender process was undertaken during the previous Rainbow Coalition administration, and the final decision to award the contract to Suez was voted through by all the members of the Rainbow Coalition who were present at the extraordinary meeting in December 2022. And as was pointed out by my predecessor, Councillor Valentine, at that meeting, the outsourcing of local authorities' services, which was introduced by the Conservative government in the 1980s, is what's led us to the environment in which we work today. And nod to Councillor Wise, who covered the back end of that already in his contribution. The hollowing out of local authority funding and staffing has left us in this position, not being able to respond as effectively as we could have been. Responding to Councillor Gibson, Charles Gibson, I'm unclear if we're looking at the same agenda paper, but your summary of the response in the paper regarding garden waste doesn't match the text in my report, but I'd be happy to take that up with you after the meeting. Councillor Nundy, in response to your point about turnout, I actually disagree that poor service results in low turnout. This was demonstrated in Maidstone just a couple of months ago, where the Conservative administration, who agreed this same contract with us, were routed and replaced by a Green and Liberal Democrat coalition. At the point the contract was agreed, our other Mid-Kent partner, Ashford, was also a Conservative administration. And just in response to Councillor Tucker, I agree with the general frustration around the seagull and chip incident. To clarify, though, the Little Wardens are employed under a different contract and a different contractor, so could not easily be redeployed to bins. Had we not been in a culture of outsourcing, perhaps that would have been possible, although had we not been in a culture of outsourcing, we wouldn't be going through the current stress because we'd have a consistent workforce collecting the bins. In summary, I think it's inevitable that this subject was going to be heavily politicised, but as my Vice Chair has just stated, I'm really hopeful that the scrutiny review panel will be thorough and apolitical. I don't want to see righteous indignation towards anyone attending those. I want to see serious, thorough questions being asked and answers being found so that we can come out of this stronger as a council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lehman. We'll now move to the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendations in the amended recommendations in the report, the amended with that thanks to the officers, please raise. All those against? And any abstentions? That motion is carried. Agenda item 12 is the local plan review. I will invite the chair of the Planning and Transportation Working Group, Councillor Alistair Gould, to speak and propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The main thing that we need to approve today is the local development scheme, which is really the timetable to bring forward the local plan. Just a bit of background on that: the timetable for the local plan was paused as a result of the uncertainty that was generated by the previous government in the autumn of last year. We had to wait quite a while to see what was going to happen in terms of housing numbers that we might be expected to work towards, whether there was going to be exceptions. And a couple of days before Christmas, we had some guidance on this, which enabled us to perhaps begin to think about how we could bring this forward, because getting a local plan done is a really important, one of the most fundamental roles of this council, because it governs so much going forward. But that guidance came out, resulting in a possible lowered numbered. And at that point, we started to move forward with the process, and looked at what the possibilities were to get a local plan done as quickly as we could, but with always bearing in mind the need for the proper consultations and minimum risk to this council of having our actions challenged. And we came forward with the options that are set out in this paper, all of which were aiming for a Regulation 19 submission in the early part of next year. The question was how we got there and what Regulation 18 consultations there were on the way. And the option that has been favoured through the working group and then Policy and Resources Committee is the option 2, which is to go for a Regulation 18 with allocations attached to it in the last quarter of this year, aiming for a Regulation 19 process in the early part of 2025. This option is, I think, the most efficient in terms of use of officer time, and also gives us the potential advantage of being able to apply a reduced land supply target once we have a Regulation 18 proposal which has allocations attached to it. So that in a nutshell is where we are at and what is being proposed, and I would welcome any discussion and questions on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. I'll invite the leader, Councillor Tim Gibson, to second the recommendations and ask whether he wishes to speak now or reserve his right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'll reserve my right. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I'll invite Councillor Bowen to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Not much to say on this to hold up this evening. We can move forward. Obviously, we're just here to agree the timetable. I think I agree with what's been said. It is vitally important that we have a local plan to serve our residents, and the quicker we can work on that, the better. But as we do work on it, we don't necessarily need to be fast. We need to make sure it gets done right. But hopefully before any new additional housing targets of 1.5 million houses may be dumped all over this lovely country. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll invite Councillor Charles Gibson to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One one or two clarifications. I just in item 6.6 on the report, it mentions Faversham Neighbourhood Plan, which is no longer at the examination stage, of course, at the pre-referendum stage. That probably requires updating before we publish that. And my final point, to add a little bit of colour to my previous comments about overview and scrutiny and the effectiveness of our committees, Councillor Gould correctly pointed out that this was the consultation timetable agreed by the committee. It was absolutely not a unanimously held view, and some members strongly argued in favour of consulting our residents earlier and in more detail. And I think residents should be aware that that was a discussion that was had. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Charles Gibson. I'll open the debate up to members. Please indicate if you wish to speak. So I'm going to start with Councillor Hunt, then I've got Councillor Clark, and I can't see.
Thank you. This is about the third time, maybe more, that I've been able to comment on this at different stages through the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group, P&R, and now here. And I think every time I have taken a vote on that, I've voted different. I voted against it, and then I abstained, and now I'm going to vote for it. So just like to be different with how I go. But that's because things are changing all the time, and a lot has happened, especially in planning, over the years, and even the last few weeks. I have still got concerns with this. I think we're concentrating too much on just the housing numbers and getting it through, get it out there and get it dealt with. And I do have that concern. I think some of the good stuff that we could really be doing with a local plan is going to be missed by the speed that we're going to be moving with this. But with what has been said by the Labour government coming in now, with what they are doing with planning, we need to do anything we can to push forward with a local plan. And if there's any possibility that we can sort of save some of this and get out the Regulation 18, we need to be doing it now. I don't think it's going to make any difference. I think government will just come along, rip it up and say we've got to build it anyway. But we need to be doing what we can, and it is important that we have a local plan for our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. I've got Councillor Simon Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I welcome this report, and I do look forward to this, the local plan coming forward for the Reg 18s and Reg 19s as soon as possible. I do reiterate that we do need to find out from the Secretary of State the meat on the bones of the new government's planning proposals, which ties in with what I've asked the leader to do with his Kent colleagues to write to the Secretary of State. We do need to get this through as soon as possible. I do take on board what Councillor Hunt has said about not missing anything, and I hope we don't miss anything before this goes out to consultation. But we got beaten up recently quite badly by the inspector when he sent in his report on the Ufton Green development between Homewood Avenue, linking up with Borden, etc. And one of the things that was brought up constantly in the inspection process was the fact that we were asserting that we had a 5-year land supply, but in the outcome of the inspector's report, he considered that, and his consideration was that we don't. We only have a 4.1 year land supply. So with a lot of speculative, large applications coming forward, we do need to have the protection of a local plan. So I welcome this document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. I have Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was at the Planning and Transportation Policy Working Group. It's quite a mouthful, and we discussed at length the various options. Option 2, to me, is the best, and I voted for it then, and I'll be voting for it tonight. Since I got elected 15 months ago, all everyone has been talking about is we've got to have this local plan. There's lots of different sections that have already been done, Things have been in process. It's not as though we've done nothing. I think we've got to get this done, and with the opportunity of having a 4-year land supply as opposed to a 5-year land supply, not knowing what the future holds, Councillor Hunt, I appreciate that. We've got to do our best in order to protect our residents, so I'll be voting for this. Thank you.
Councillor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll be supporting it. I sit on the group, and it's we had a long meeting the other night. I fully support option 2. One thing I would ask, because it's a very short timetable now between where we are now and submission, and we've got to get those 2 consultations on in the meantime. The local plan is a weighty too. When it runs into, I would say, 1,000 pages. I don't know, possibly more. Every member in this chamber is going to be asked questions about it when it comes out, and the members of the public are going to expect us to know quite a lot about it. It's a very long document, so I would only ask that somewhere in this timetable that we work. Perhaps we're working with the leader and the chairman of the working group, that we get adequate member briefings in, so that members are well up to speed about what it is that we're putting in our Reg 18 and our Reg 19 and subsequently in our final submission. It's a lot of work, I know. If we can have that, if we can have that to ensure that we can all answer the questions that our residents will no doubt throw at us, and they're very good at asking very detailed questions, as we all know. Being on top of all of that is going to be almost impossible, but we need to give ourselves the best possible chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whiting. Yeah, I remember the questions from the last one, and that was only answering questions on one section. Councillor Baldock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to respond to the idea that we haven't got any good policies, because staff have been working constantly on new policies, improved policies, but then we've got reports being made, and we have to find balances. And it's like, one moment we want good policies on affordable housing, we want good policies on biodiversity, and we want good policies on green spaces. And then we're told, well, actually you can't have quite as much affordable housing as you might like, and you've got to crush down on the green spaces because of the viability. Now we've got the next PTPWG. We're going to look at some of the policies that are going forward. But I think we've got to realise that there is no good outcome when governments impose unsustainable housing levels on local communities and do not enable them to put their own policies which reflect local needs at the heart of it, but pander constantly to developers or the private sector, and that even as far as I can see, this new government is going to look to the private sector to deliver on things that we as a council should have a hell of a lot more control over, such as council housing. So this is always going to be a no-win situation for residents until local democracy is restored to local councils and they can do what's right by their residents. But I will be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. Anybody else wish to speak on this item? So we'll go to Councillor Gibson, as you reserved your right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite simply, I move that we go to the vote. Thank you.
Lovely stuff. Did you wish to sum up, Councillor Gould? Or? Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Baldock took a lot of the words right out of my mouth there, actually, that I don't think this is a process that any of us are ever going to be particularly happy with, and I think we're going to hear that from our residents as we go forward and we do put forward allocations. I think a lot of this is done with our hands firmly up our back in terms of what we and what we're aiming for in this process is to get the least worst outcome and the best policies that we can do. The policies have been worked on. We paused the progress of the plan but we didn't pause the working on the policies and the background work that was going on. So that has been going on, and we will be discussing some of that work tomorrow for a number of hours as well. I certainly take on the point about the member briefing. I think that's certainly something we'll need to do, because there are going to be a lot of questions asked. This isn't going to be something that we can put through without a lot of noise being generated along the line. But I think this is the best way forward, and I would commend it to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. We'll now move to the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendations as written on the papers? Lovely. Lovely. So anybody against? And any abstentions? One abstention. So those are carried. Item 13 of the agenda is the planning scheme of delegations. I'll invite the chair of the planning committee, Councillor Mike Baldock, to speak and propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll speak also as the chair of the Constitution Working Group, as we've gone through these at length. And I thank the members of the Constitution Working Group and Robin. Really detailed discussions that we've had on this, and it's basically to try and make planning a little bit more transparent, to give confidence to the public and to parish councils that their views are being listened to. There have already been some changes. The head of planning has introduced a new template, which means that you can actually see the objections and where in the reports those objections are referenced. So it's to, when people sit up there, they need to know that what their concerns are have been taken on board by the planning committee, and these measures are steps towards that. So I know I've gone on a bit about something that most people think is really boring, but I do think it's important, and I do think this is a big step forward. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. I'll invite the Vice Chair of the Planning Committee, Councillor Elliot Jays, to second the recommendations and ask whether he wishes to reserve his right or speak now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll second and reserve my right.
Wonderful. Councillor Bowen, no. Councillor Charles Gibson? No. No. Anybody else? Do you want to use your reserved right there, Councillor Jays?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Baldock, nothing really to sum up, but if you wish.
Yeah, a few more points. No, not really.
Thank you. Wonderful. In which case, we'll move to the vote. So all those in favour of the recommendations as appearing on your agenda papers? Lovely. Going for anybody against? And any abstentions? Councillor Whiting? Oh, sorry, was that in favour? Thank you. Lovely. I was just wondering where we were going there. Right, so that is unanimous then. Thank you very much, everybody. We can move on to item 14, which I'm sure will be just as fast. Next item on the agenda is allocation of committee seats. Can members confirm that they've had chance to read this lovely paperwork? Excellent. So I'll invite Councillor Tim Gibson to introduce the report and propose the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quite simply, it's a recalculation of the political balance and allocation of committee seats. There are two recommendations. The Council has to agree with the political balance calculation set out in Appendix 2, and the Council has to allocate seats to those committees and to agree the appointment of members to those committees in accordance with the wishes of group leaders, as set out in Appendix 3. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Councillor Gibson. Councillor Bowen, I'll invite you to speak and ask if you wish to reserve or speak
Thank
now.
you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to second and speak now, and let's get on with it.
Lovely. Councillor Gibson.
Sorry to put a tiny delay in the process. Just the Liberal within me bridles at the word "we have no legal choice," how much time frame is there within a legal choice? Because obviously we're going to have to do this again in 7 weeks' time. So is that what the legal time frame is, or are we having a double discussion because we really like being here at 9:45, much as I'm sure we all do? Thank you, Chair.
I'll ask the Chief Exec to come in on that one.
So the rules are that we have to do it in words like the most practicable time. So because we have a meeting, it is incumbent on us to do it. I accept it may mean we're doing it again, but because the political balance has changed and we've had this meeting and we know the answer, we know the proposal, we can't just say actually we'll leave it, because something else could happen in that time and then we'll leave it. So it is about the most practical time, but we accept that we do have a by-election coming up and that will change things potentially.
Lovely. Would anybody else like to speak on this particular item? Wunderbar. So we're coming back to Councillor Tim Gibson to see if you wish to sum up.
Quite simply, ditto to my introduction, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All those in favour of the recommendations as they appear, please raise. That is unanimous this time round. Excellent. Thank you very much, ladies and gents. So I am going to bring forward, move back agenda item 15 and 16 and bring forward item 17, purely because I don't see the point in going into private session and then coming back out of it again. So if everyone's happy with that. Agenda item 17 is the report of the Standards Subcommittee from the 27th of November.
Point of order. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This report has come through
which point of order?
Friday.
Could you tell me which rule from the
Well, I don't think it's urgent. It got sent out last
so
Friday,
that was my decision.
So
it was my decision that it was urgent, and the Mayor's decision is final. So your point of order is out of order. Thank you. Right, I'll invite the Chair of the Standards Committee, Councillor Ashley Wise, to speak and propose the recommendation to note the report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As set out in paragraph 3.2 of the report, there are the sanctions of the Standards Hearing Subcommittee held on the 23rd of November 2023 are included in the findings being reported to full council. I therefore propose the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. I'll invite Councillor James Hunt to second the recommendation and ask whether he wishes to speak now or reserve his right.
I second this, and I won't reserve my right. I'll say all I want to say on it now, and that is that I second it.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Councillor Bowen, Councillor Gibson, any other members wishing to speak? I've got Councillor Baldock.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too struggle to see how a report of a meeting back in November can be considered urgent, given that the person it's about was known to not be able to attend. I think that's quite sad.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor. You have already said and responded to this particular point, and it is your decision. So why the member should not continue. Thank you.
And I am commenting on that, Mr. Councillor Bowen. That was an explanation. I am now making my speech.
Through the chair, chaps.
Quite right. Yes, it's quite appalling that the member about whom this is discussed hasn't got the chance to speak about it. He didn't want it in private at the meeting, but it was taken into private at the time. The report includes bullying. I experienced what the subject member went through during the drawn-out process before this went to the Standards Committee. I saw how he was told he could not have access. Why did he want access to some documents? Then he was told, OK, you can. Drawing out the process and putting extreme stress on a member. None of that's in here. But that, to my mind, brings in thoughts of bullying. When you have power and you play with another person, That is bullying, not what was done at the original meeting, which had the support of that meeting. None of that's in here. This report also fails to mention that a second independent person looked at the issue and found there wasn't a case to answer. This doesn't mention that the monitoring officer was also acting as a legal person on the meeting. There are a whole stream of faults found with this process.
Councillor Baldock, I understand that that is incorrect.
Okay, yeah, it can be corrected afterwards, not in my 3 minutes. This has been an appalling process which leaves the Swale Independent Group, frankly, with no confidence in the standards regime at this council. One of our members was treated abysmally. We cannot have support for such a process. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock. For clarification purposes, I'm going to allow the monitoring officer in just to clarify that point that was incorrect.
I was not the legal advisor to the committee during the standards subcommittee. That was senior corporate governance lawyer Gary Rowland.
Thank you for that. So if we can have Councillor Harrison and then Councillor Braun, please.
I think Councillor Braun just got in ahead of me, Mr. Mayor.
As you wish to defer to Councillor Braun, we'll let Councillor Braun come in first and then yourself then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just, I'm still new to this. I was just wondering if I could have some clarification as to what I'm being asked to note here.
Councillor Wise, do you want to just...
It's basically that whenever there is there are findings following a standards hearing subcommittee, those findings have to be reported and noted to full council. So that's what we're being asked to note.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was, I thought this report was for noting, not for going on a rant about it. And it's
Point of order. Point of order.
Allowing an individual.
Again, can we please state which order number we wish to make a point of order on?
The fact that I was accused of ranting is not acceptable terms. I wasn't ranting.
Do you want to withdraw, Councillor Harrison, on that?
I think it's in the ears of the beholder. You can't tell me I'm not hearing ranting. You might not think you are. That's what I'm hearing, okay? My point was, for noting is for noting, not actually going into it. I read it. I thought, fair enough. It's a report of the panel that made the decision, end of story. But process says it has to be noted. I think it's very magnanimous of you, Mr. Mayor, to allow the member to actually go on as he did. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison. And that is a good reminder that this is a report for noting. The decision has been taken. A committee did make the... Give me just a second. I'm going to allow the two speakers that I had before we head to the vote. So, again, can we go through the Mayor, please? It is also 10 to 10, so members, I'm going to move that we extend standing orders with your grace and permission. Anyone against that? Against. Just the one against. Excellent. Right, so I'll take Councillor Nundy and Councillor MacDonald, and then we'll go to the vote on this one.
Just as a point of clarification before I'm asked to note something, could someone from the Standards Committee please let me know the date that the minutes of the subcommittee were approved at the Standards Committee meeting?
You'll receive a written answer to that one following.
Well, in which case I can't note it.
Councillor MacDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The issue that I've got is that we were not given any facts at all, and I don't disregard the committee that actually looked at it, the Standards Committee. There's only a very small proportion, and legally I would actually like to know what the facts are. So again, I can't note a report that doesn't give you any facts. Thank you.
Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In answer to Councillor Nundy's question, the Standards Committee's met 3 times and it is yet to hear these minutes. I'm shocked to see that after 8 months this is finally before full council. Full council's met 4 times in that time. I'm not sure why it hasn't come before us. And we were told by the Chair of Standards that it is routine that it comes to full council, when in fact the Constitution says in 4.16.1 that it's a possible sanction to include reporting the findings to council.
Any other member wish to speak on this particular item? Nope, wonderful. Right, so we'll move to Councillor Wise, if you wish to sum up the debate.
All I would say is there are, as we've had at the last Standards Committee and through the training that we had for the Standards Committee, there have been issues identified in terms of the arrangements that we have in terms of standards. A lot of this, by the way, predates me being elected or even or becoming chair of the Standards Committee. But there are issues that we've discussed at length at that Standards Committee meeting to do with the arrangements that do need addressing, and part of that pertains to why it has been so long since the hearing was held until this is being asked to be noted at full council. Thank you.
Just before we go to the vote, I'll remind everybody what I said back at mayor making. I hope that this can be done with respect and civility throughout, towards each other, towards our officers, and towards the general public, and from them too. I think part of the standards process is a key element in ensuring respect. It may not have the teeth that we think that it might need at times. That is a legal issue, not an issue for us here tonight. But when a standards committee has its findings after a subcommittee, we trust in them in the same way that we trust in the licensing subcommittees. So therefore I will move to the vote, and all those in favour of agreeing the recommendations. Those against? And any abstentions, please? That is carried, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Item 15 is the fun one, the exclusion of press and public. So I'll propose under section 100A, subsection 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business on the grounds that they involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 1, information relating to any individual. Are all agreed? Any dissenters? Lovely, so if we can give it a couple of minutes to turn everything off.